Funny how? Funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown. Tell me what's funny.
So our next entry for the Divine Comedy is the 1984 comedy Ghostbusters, written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, and directed by Ivan Reitman.
Ghosts.
Hello, Ghostbusters.
They're real.
You do? You have?
They're here. Ghostbusters.
Hey, anybody see a ghost?
They catch the ghost that won't stay dead. They're armed. They're dangerous.
Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
All right, that's bad. Okay. All right, important safety tip. Thanks, Egon.
They're professionals.
Oh, I'm the chairman of the largest paranormal removal company in America.
You see it?
They're all that stands between you and the end of the world.
The city is headed for a disaster of biblical proportion.
Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the sky.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Your girlfriend lives in the corner penthouse of Spook Central.
You want this body?
Is this a trick question?
Got your stick? Hold! Beat him up! Smoke him! Make him hard! Ready!
Ghostbusters. Starring Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Sigourney Weaver, Harold Ramis, Rick Moranis. Coming to save the world. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters.
We came, we saw, we kicked it.
So before we talk about it, we'll just give you a little bit of background as we normally do. So Dan Aykroyd wrote the original script in 1981, and he planned for him and his best mate John Belushi to star in the film. And the film would be about a sort of pair of Ghostbusters who would travel through time and space to combat a host of demonic and supernatural threats. And apparently Eddie Murphy was also slated to star, as he was sort of doing very well on Saturday Night Live at the time. Then Belushi left our world, as director Ivan Reitman put it, and Aykroyd kind of shelved the script for a couple of years. But the idea was niggling away in his brain, and he sort of picked it back up again a couple of years later, and he spoke to Bill Murray about the script. And Murray suggested that Ivan Reitman could be a good director for it, as they just made Stripes together, along with Harold Ramis as well as sort of a co-star and co-writer. And they'd also made Meatballs a few years before, so Murray had good experience with Reitman and Harold Ramis. So Aykroyd's original script was like a whopper. It was like about 500 pages long, and they say that 1 page of screenplay equates to like 1 minute screen time. So this was like a 500 fucking minute script. And it was really out there, and it wasn't set on Earth. It was set in the future in these parallel dimensions and around the sort of the universe. It wasn't really set on Earth at all. It was a really crazy script. Now, Aykroyd is a real sort of fan of the supernatural, and he's got I think his grandfather was really into it and was a medium and this kind of thing. So Aykroyd kind of grew up with this kind of thing, and and even now he's a massive enthusiast about parallel dimensions and ghosts and the supernatural, and he's a real expert in it. So he had a real sort of grounding to write this script. But as I said, it was an absolute bonkers behemoth script. So Reitman sort of suggested to Aykroyd that they should, rewrite it and sort of hone it down. And he suggested that Harold Ramis would be able to rewrite the script with him. And when Ramis met up with Aykroyd, he really impressed him with his knowledge of quantum physics, the supernatural, and myth. And the two of them began a rewrite of the script. And Reitman came on board as the director, and Columbia Pictures were really keen to make the movie, and they really needed a hit for the summer of '84 as they didn't have anything scheduled. So they sort of asked Reitman what the budget should be and how much it would be. And he'd previously made Stripes for 10 million, and he just plucked this figure out the air. He just trebled it and said, "Oh yeah, it'll cost 30 million." And that's what they gave him. Columbia Pictures like, "Okay, here's 30 million. Go off and make your film, but it has to be in theaters in the States by June of 1984." Now, there was also a few issues with special effects because they couldn't use industrial light and magic because they were busy working on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So Columbia paid $5 million to create their own in-house special effects studio for the film, headed up by Richard Edlund. So further rewrites of the script continued. Aykroyd, Ramis, and Reitman basically locked themselves away in Aykroyd's house in Martha's Vineyard and spent 3 weeks thrashing out the final script. And the movie was shot in October 1983 and was released in June '84. So what a quick turnaround, sort of a 6-7 month turnaround to make a film of this sort of budget, this level. That's an amazing turnaround. But the UK, we didn't get the film till Christmas of '84, which was often the way back then. You get big films coming out in the summer, and they wouldn't come over in the UK till that Christmas. I think Star Wars was out in May '77 in the States, but we didn't get it till Christmas '77 in the UK. So one of the things Reitman liked about the idea of Ghostbusters, he liked it. He sort of saw it as like they were firemen who were called out to catch ghosts instead of putting out fires. And his original idea would be that, or Aykroyd's original idea is that they were just sort of ordinary blue-collar workers, sort of blue-collar guys who sort of were like firemen. But Reitman sort of came up with the idea that they should be scientists, they should be smart. And he said that one of the things he wanted about the characters to be is that he wanted them to be the smartest guys in the room, even if they're acting a little stupid. So the script was kind of ready and it was time to do the casting. And as Reitman had previously worked with John Candy in Stripes, he wanted John Candy to play Louis Tully, who's the geeky neighbour of Sigourney Weaver's character, Dana Barrett. And Candy was sent the script, but Reitman admitted that Candy just didn't get it. For some reason, the character of Tully just didn't click with Candy. He wanted to play Tully as this sort of mad German guy who had tons of German shepherds around, and he just didn't really kind of click with the character. So Candy eventually turned the script down, and Ivan Reitman sent it to Rick Moranis, who immediately sort of said yes, he understood the character. And Rick Moranis called Reitman and said, "Look, can you please thank Candy for turning this down?" So, and then Aykroyd sort of said as well, I was watching this behind-the-scenes documentary about the movie the other night, and I was watching this interview with Aykroyd, and he said that basically Murray and Moranis brought their A game to the movie, and they became sort of the two central pillars of the movie, which I think is true, but I think we shouldn't sort of not talk about the other actors. Like Sigourney Weaver is brilliant as Dana Barrett, and Ivan Reitman wasn't keen on Sigourney Weaver for Dana's character to start with because he thought she was too serious because she'd been in films like Alien. Obviously, she was famous for Alien. She'd been in thrillers like The Year of Living Dangerously. And he didn't think that Weaver could pull off maybe the comedic side of the role that was needed. So apparently in the audition, Weaver just acted like a dog. She just jumped onto all fours and started barking and howling like a dog. And that sold Reitman to sort of cast her in the part. And she's brilliant. And the original part of Dana, obviously in the movie, she's this musician who works in the orchestra. In the original script, she was I think she was a stripper or something like that. And when Sigourney Weaver was cast in the role, Ivan Reitman said, "Look, what do you want your character to do for a living?" And Sigourney Weaver chose the musician. She's like a cellist in the orchestra. So that's a bit of an interesting tidbit there in the casting. And obviously we've got like the central trio of the Ghostbusters. So we've got Bill Murray as Venkman, who is the smart ass / sex pest of the Ghostbusters. He's the wise ass. He brings a lot of the humor. You got Aykroyd himself as Dr. Ray Stantz, who is like, I love Aykroyd in this film. I love the character of Stantz. He's like, at one point, Venkman calls him the heart of the Ghostbusters. And he really is, because he has this sort of real childlike enthusiasm for everything. He's just like this super excited kid all the time, and he's a great character. And then you got Harold Ramis as Egon Spengler, who is sort of like the serious one, the scientist, who's yeah, he's great. It's such a great central trio, and they've all got different roles within the team, and I absolutely love them. And now obviously we've got Ernie Hudson coming on as Winston Zedmore, who sort of comes in halfway through the film. Now, originally the character of Zedmore was going to be this ex-military sort of commando who was going to come in, but then they sort of changed it last minute to just be a regular blue-collar guy who doesn't even believe in ghosts and is just there for the paycheck. So I think that resulted in the role of Zedmore being a little bit underwritten, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's still, yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame for Ernie Hudson there. So Aykroyd and Reitman both said that when shooting began, they just had this special feeling straight away that they knew the movie was going to be special. And even when they were filming it, Bill Murray admitted it and said the same thing to Aykroyd one day when they're having lunch in his apartment. And Aykroyd knew at that moment that the film was going to be a success, if even Bill Murray was saying it, because Aykroyd was quoted as saying that Murray's bullshit detector is set to really high, and if Murray said it was going to be good, they kind of knew that it was going to be a success, and it really freaking was, wasn't it? It's a fantastic movie. So there you go. It's a bit of behind the scenes there for the movie. So we'll actually talk about it now. So where do we start? I mean, Ben, what about you? Why don't you kick off, mate? So what are your sort of early memories? Can you remember the first time that you saw the film?
Yeah, Christmas '84. I'll just put in my notes. I remember it as being one of the first event movies where the logo was everywhere, the song was everywhere, but the movie was nowhere to be seen. It seemed to take an awful long time, and the closest you seemed to get to it was, I think you got free transfers. You got everything Ghostbusters. It was free transfers, I think, in shredded wheat. And I remember I have got a typewriter in the loft somewhere that has got one of the dogs, the devil dogs, transfers on the front of my typewriter. I think I got the typewriter. I said I've been 9. Awesome. Yeah, I got a Rexel Silver Reed typewriter for Christmas, and I put the thingy on. And one of my mates gave me Slimer, which we both said our notes. We never ever knew him was Slimer until the real Ghostbusters came out. I remember that we made clear memories that we made. Give me this sticker. A transfer and said, you want this? It's Onion Head from the Ghostbusters. And I've always thought it was called, whether it's right, I don't know.
No, it is right.
This thing was called Onion Head.
It is Onion Head.
Is that right? I've never ever even bothered to look it up.
Yeah, in the documentary it says there's Onion Head because I obviously Stance calls him an ugly little spud, doesn't he? And I didn't know what his official name was, but you're right, it is Onion Head.
It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah,
it seemed to take a long time for the film that came out. That Christmas, I even got the book of the film, not the novelisation. I used to get the story, the little A4 softback things with the pictures on. It was great sometimes because sometimes you got stills that weren't actually in the movie because that's the geek in me. I had Gremlins, I had E.T., I had Ghostbusters. So I had a lot weren't exactly Ghostbusters size, but the Ghostbusters book before I actually saw the movie. So we went to see it between Christmas and New Year. And I just remember my dad really liking it. He was quite excited to go and see it, and him absolutely breaking up with the rest of the audience when Venkman gets slimed. He slimed me. It really did bring the house down. I just put, why does it work? I think it works because it's such a great story. It really is a fully rounded film that ties up all the loose ends. And it took me, I gotta admit this, it took me years to link the coming of Gozer with the rise of paranormal activity in New York. And I think it's almost like a throwaway line delivered by Egon, when he's trying to explain that the normal level of activity would be the size of, picture this Twinkie or something, and this is the normal activity, size of activity in a city like New York. And I would imagine one, I don't know, 30 times bigger. And it's because of the what's it called? Spook Central, I call it. I don't know where Dana Barrett lives. Was designed specifically to open a portal to bring Gozer into our world, and it's now happening. And so the level of paranormal activity has gone skyrocketed. So the Ghostbusters are having to deal with that. It's such a great film. You said it's got such a great ensemble cast. And yeah, I think the standout one when you watch it again is, for me, it's always Egon, where he's incredibly clever and intelligent, but at the same time slightly psychotic, where again, it's like almost like throwaway line where Venkman mentions how he stopped him trying to drill a hole in his head. And Egon says, it would have worked if you hadn't stopped me. Like, and he's like the designer of all of the equipment they've got, and have basically just for the what's it, for the sake of science and advancement, he's allowing them to wander around with fucking basic nuclear devices on the backs as the it's like fucking hell. So I really enjoy it when you watch it now as an adult. It's great. I think every cast member is almost as big or little times they spend on the screen is very well written. Apart from, we said, Zedmore, which I don't think is any fault of Ernie Hudson. He just seems to come into it, and he's the only character is sort of on the peripheral all the way through. I just get a great scene with Dan Aykroyd. Ray Stanza, and they're sharing the thoughts on the rise of the supernatural, and he thinks he's at the end days. It's like his only decent scene. But sort of, you're right. I think he's quite underwritten. My other favourite one in the periphery is always the secretary, is Janine. I just love her voice. It's
Annie
fantastic.
Potts, yeah, she's great.
Annie Potts is Janine. Ghostbusters, what do you want? I put her onto the phone like every time with us. It's fantastic. And
you know, like sorry, I was going to say the chemistry between Annie Potts and Harold Ramis, because obviously Janine has a crush on Spengler, doesn't she? And she's like, I like to read. I think it's a fabulous way to spend your spare time. And what do you do? Is like, I collect spores, molds, and fungus. But it's like, but apparently on set that was real. Apparently Annie Potts had a real life crush on Harold Ramis at the time. So she wasn't really acting. She did actually genuinely fancy Harold Ramis, which I think is quite funny.
Who wouldn't? He's a sexy man.
I mean, yeah, I'd do him.
But isn't it, watching that scene this morning, isn't that a massive misunderstanding? She says something to him about, he says he's underneath the table, underneath the desk, because he's trying to fix the print, and he comes up, he says, printer's dead.
Yeah.
And then she said something, no, I don't think it is, I love to read. It's like, he didn't say, that's the first time I've really noticed it. He didn't say print is dead, he said print is dead. And he's just looking at her, and she just goes off on this thing about how she likes to read, and you look like an intelligent man. What do you do? I collect all spores and funguses. Fucking hell. The mayor, Larry the mayor, he's your typical New York mayor, isn't he? But he's really good in it. I just love the change in his attitude when it's pointed out that by Venkman to him that if he lets them go ahead and try and defeat Gozer, he'll have saved the lives of millions of potential voters, and his attitude changes.
Instantly.
Flash, isn't it? Oh, it's brilliant, yeah. And obviously we've got William Atherton as the Walter Peck, who obviously went on to star in Die Hard as Walter Peck, and every other film he's in is Walter Peck.
Walter Peck Thornburg.
Walter Peck Thornburg. But at the same time, you're looking at Walter Peck thing, he's got a point. They have got like nuclear devices, unlicensed nuclear devices they're running around with. And what do they do with a ghost? That's what he wants to know, doesn't he? What are you doing with everything? Because you see him putting everything in the trap, which obviously does break, and he switches it off. Or does he switches off to something forceful or something like that? And if you do that,
a protection grid.
Does again, you can arrest him.
Yeah,
hey, you do your job, pencil neck. Don't tell me how to do mine. Very good. And then of course, again, the standout secondary role, obviously Rick Moranis as Louis Tully, just fucking brilliant. It's the small guy with big ambitions to live a playboy lifestyle. That's the way I look at it. It's like an accountant by day, but he wants to be so badly to be this playboy, and he's like his body language, and he comes out there, he sort of waits, doesn't he, for Sigourney Weaver's dinner to come back and pounces, you know what I mean? And just talks shite. What is it he's mentioned? He's got like a 40-minute workout that he speeds up so he can get to in 20 minutes. That's really funny. He comes to make me, I thought you're the guy at drugstore jumping my vitamins off, and you should drop by. I've got a lot of low sodium drinks. His partner's utter shit. He's worse than we were in college. He really is, and I think that says a lot. But he's such a good character. I mean, what is it? The fact he's having a party, but he's only having a party for his clients. He's an accountant, isn't he? And he has parties for his clients because he can write it off as a tax thing or something.
You know what I love about that? I love it when Ted and Annette Fleming turn up and he just basically gives their life story. Everyone's like, hey, okay, so this is Ted and Annette Fleming, and Ted's got a sporting store which has currently gone into receivership, and it's just like, it's just like, oh, okay, mate, just
just silly. He really tells everything. They haven't got like the third bankruptcy or something. It's like, oh, fuck, but it's like he doesn't think anything of it, does he? It's always just introducing him. You're right. It's absolutely cracking. Yeah, he's really good. He's really good in it. I like his everything about him is great. his tracksuit he's wearing, where he's like half mast and he's like pulled up to his waist. And he's just when he's walking back down to the corridor, just throw away lines. Okay, I'm going to take a shower.
I'm going to take a shower. Locks himself out his apartment again
every time. And the fact that he climbed onto the ledge of a fucking skyscraper to try and unplug an aerial because Dana thought Dana left the TV on too loud. So you know what I did? I climbed onto the verge. You're like, what? But actually, it's like not. You think at first, like, when you watch it as a kid, he's like quite creepy, and then when you watch it as an adult, he's quite sweet. He just wants to help. He's not like trying to rape Dana or anything like that. He's not with sex.
No, he just got a crush on her.
Help her.
Yeah,
crush, and it's just so funny, and they're brilliant. Obviously, okay, who brought the dog? And, got to talk about this. I put again why I didn't know this. I was mentioning last night. I said, it's a fantastic. I've read the stuff I didn't even know. I didn't know they'd start their own special effects unit, and it's in one of my notes. I put why it works, and I put because the special effects really. I'm not just saying it; they really do stand up as really good.
They do.
Practical and the opticals. Usually you get one fill in the other, but it works really well. I mean, there's one slightly dodgy, but it's not dodgy. I wouldn't say antiquated. I quite like it because it looks a bit dodgy. And I think it's where the dog bursts through the doors and it looks a bit cartoony.
Runs across the road into the park. Yeah.
But I can live with it. I don't think it looks that bad.
No,
but I
it
think
doesn't.
the special effects, the opening the fridge to see the Goza Kingdom, the Kingdom of Zool and everything through there is absolutely fantastic.
Zool.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
Fucking great. And the eggs popping on the counter and frying. And obviously, we've got to talk about, I was listening back to an old podcast because I like to listen to the sound of our own voices. I've gone really weird like that. And we were just mentioning, we were discussing Goonies and PG or not PG. And we said, we should really look at Ghostbusters because there's things in that. Like, fucking hell, there's things in that would never be a PG now. And my dad mentioned it about the seat, the chair with arms bursting out of it. And I remember that really made me jump when I went to see it. And Dad said it made him shit himself, as well. Not literally, but.
So I've got a bit of a tidbit about that scene. So that is quite a scary scene, right? We've got the arms ripping out of the chair and pinning Dana down as the chair goes into the kitchen. So apparently, when they first shot it, they shot it a few times, and it just wasn't being effective enough because I think whoever was controlling the arms wasn't really being aggressive with Sigourney Weaver, and they were worried about where they were putting their hands, obviously, so they didn't want to, inappropriately touch her and that kind of thing. And apparently it was Sigourney Weaver who said, look, just fucking do it. Just be aggressive. Do what you need to do. Don't worry about it. And that's what they did for the shots. Obviously, the arms shoot out the chair and they do just grab her wherever on her body. I think they actually do touch her boob at one point. And that's because, Sigourney Weaver was just like, look, just stop pussyfooting about. Do what you got to do for the scene. And it's quite a scary scene. It's really effective. And Ivan Reitman said that, once the film was out, he'd sort of go and sneak into screenings and stuff to see how the film was playing. But at first, all Ivan Reitman was concerned about was the comedy and hoping that the jokes landed. And then he realized in the cinema that how well some of the scares were landing as well. And it sort of really made him happy that the scares were sort of landing as well. Like for me, the scene where, Venkman goes to Dana's for the date, goes to the apartment, and she's been possessed by Goza or Zool, or what? And there is no Dana, only Zool. So she gets possessed by Zool, and that scene it's a great mix of humor and horror because Venkman is still being the wise ass, but you can tell, And again, we talk about PG or not PG. Some of the dialogue in that scene is a bit risque, where she's like, I want you inside me. And Venkman, the way Venkman reacts to that is brilliant. He kind of laughs, goes, why not? But then he's like, no, I have a rule where I don't get involved with possessed people. And it sounds like there's already two of you in there already. And it's like, it's a great scene. Bill Murray is brilliant here. And, but when she starts to scream and levitate above the bed and she growls at him, I mean, that's pretty intense. And it's again, practical effects as she levitates above the bed. It's brilliant. It's so well done. And the score as well, the score by Elmer Bernstein, I love it because a lot, as it's 84, a lot of the music in the film is sort of pop music at the time. Obviously, you got Ray Parker Jr.'s theme, which was everywhere and is brilliant. It's a fantastic theme, but you've got stuff like Cleaning Up the Town, Saving the Day. You've got a lot of these pop songs like the Magic song as well. So there's a lot of pop songs throughout the film, but that shouldn't overshadow the fantastic score. Like the main Ghostbusters theme, not the Ray Parker Jr. one, but the orchestral theme. It's a great theme. Like the score is brilliant, but that score in that particular scene where Dana lifts above the bed and she's screaming at Venkman, it's brilliant. It's such a good score, and that scene, that it is fantastic, and it's good to see that the scares work just as much as the comedy, and it's just a perfect blend of humor and scares. It really is.
What I'd really like to do is talk to Dana. I want to talk to Dana. Dana, it's Peter.
There is no Dana. There is only Zoo.
Oh, Zuli, you nut. Now, come on. Come on, I want to talk to Dana. Dana, just relax. Come on. Dana. Can I talk to Dana?
There is no Dana, only Zool.
What a lovely singing voice you must have. Now, I'm going to count to 3, Zuli, and if I don't get to talk to Dana, there's going to be some real trouble in this apartment, I think. 1, 2, 2.5. Please come down.
As you said about the effects, like the effects are fantastic. The effects of the protonic blasters, whatever they're called, that they use, they look great, and the ghost effects are brilliant. Like when you see Onion Head for the first time in the hotel, it looks fantastic. It really does, and it holds up so well today. It really is brilliant. It's so good. The effects are so good. And I always remember we've talked about the scene where, Venkman says, oh, he slimed me. I always remember when you'd watch Saturday morning kids TV and they'd advertise, films coming out. I remember, I think there was a program called Number 73, which was on ITV, which was a kids TV show. And I always remember when Return of the Jedi came out and they showed the clip of Endor when they're on the speeder bikes, Luke and Leia on the speeder bikes chasing after the stormtroopers. But I always remember when they showed the clip from Ghostbusters, and whenever there was a clip from Ghostbusters on the telly, it was always that one of Venkman in the corridor with Onion Head, and then Onion Head sort of goes and sort of charges at Venkman, and you've got Ray saying, "Don't move, it won't hurt you," and sort of Venkman screaming his head off as Onion Head is sort of charging towards him. It was always that clip. I have real memories of just seeing that clip like 100 times when I was a kid on the TV. So yeah, I mean. I love this film so much, and I just think it's certain aspects, if we put our politically correct fucking hats on, some aspects may not play so well now. Like Venkman, he is a little bit of a sex pest. There's the great opening scene after we've seen the poor librarian shit herself in the library. We've got the scene on campus where Venkman's conducting this ESP, this extrasensory perception test with a couple of students, and it's really funny, You've got like the curly-headed kid who we've seen in Christine. I think he's in Christine, isn't he? He's one of the baddies in Christine. But he's sort of like he's got electrodes connected to these students, and he's holding up these cards that have different symbols on them, and they're having to use their ESP abilities to guess what's on the card. And he's just torturing this poor kid. Like even when he gets it right, he says, "No, you didn't get it," and he just keeps giving him electric shocks. And then there's the girl Jennifer, the very attractive student who is not getting any of them right at all, but Venkman just isn't shocking her. And he's just using it as an excuse, really, just to crack onto her. And it does, at the end of the scene, once the guy with the curly hair has sort of said, it's pissing me off, and he storms out, and Venkman's saying, oh, you've got to get used to that, Jennifer. That's the kind of attitude people are going to have towards your amazing abilities. And he's trying to get her to go back later that night, and he's blatantly trying to, shag one of the students. So you can see that as a little bit problematic, but whatever, But it's a funny scene. It establishes Venkman's character straight away, that he's a bit of a charlatan. He's not this fantastic scientist. And also, when I'm skipping around a bit, but when like the evil Dean Yeager turns up, the smarmy Dean, to sort of kick them off campus and say, he says, "You are a poor scientist, Dr. Venkman." But there's this great line from Venkman where, they're going to get kicked off campus, and Venkman's defense is, "But the kids love us." It's great. It's such a, it's such a funny. It's a great scene. But I'll just talk about one scene before I hand back to you, mate. And it's just like the opening scene in the library where Venkman, Stantz, and Spengler see the ghost for the first time. That whole sequence is so brilliantly written, and it establishes the characters really, really well. So obviously, it starts off with Stantz and Venkman going into the library. I haven't made notes of the specific dialogue, but some of the things that Stantz comes out with are just like, "Oh, you forget, Peter, I was there at this unexplained mass sponge migration." And it's like, what's that? And Venkman saying, "Oh, Ray, the sponge just moved 1.5 feet." It's like, Stantz is so enthusiastic about everything, and Venkman is kind of the cynical, smart arse, But I just love the chemistry between the three of them, because they're so different in terms of character, but they work so well as a unit together. And it's just like when they go down into the library and they see like the big stack of books in the middle of the floor, and like Ray says, "Oh, this is like," I can't remember the exact line of dialogue, I didn't write it down, but he's like, "Oh, this is symmetrical book stacking. Symmetrical book stacking, just like what happened in Philadelphia in 1947. And Venkman's response is, "Yeah, you're right. No human being would stack books like this." And it's just, Venkman is just so, he just doesn't buy into it, does he? He's so cynical about the whole thing until they see the ghost. And when they see the library ghost, sort of everything changes a little bit. And Venkman's like, so what do we do? And like, it's obvious the three of them don't know what they want to do. Like, Spengler immediately just goes back to his calculator and starts tapping, and Venkman just whacks it out of his hand. It's like, "Will you stop that?" And they get Venkman to talk to the ghost, and he's like, "Oh, where are you from originally?" And the ghost just ignores them and tells him to shush. And then Ray comes up with his great idea, which is just to pounce on her. And then you get like a real great scare. You get like the first scare of the movie, where the seemingly nice old lady ghost just turns into this massive, horrible skeleton type ghost thing that roars at them, and they just shit themselves and run out. But it's a really great, effective scene, because it just, as I said, establishes the three characters of the Ghostbusters. I'm not sure I understand. So shut up, Siri. It really establishes the characters so well. It's a great scene. I absolutely love it. Yeah. So, what are your other favourite scenes in the film, mate?
No, just sticking on that one there. I mean, again, that was another like PG or not PG. That we absolutely shit ourselves in the pictures when that the librarian tests into basically a skull, screams. I mean, it filled the screen. And I am more than sure that that slight clip was cut when it was premiered on British television. I think you just see their reaction. You don't see what it turns into. But I always remember when they're searching through the hotel for Onion Head, and it's Egon, as he's got his little, what's it called? It's
PKE meter.
PKE meter. And I don't think at this point you've actually seen it. And he's just wandering around the corridor and comes up with this guy trying to get into his room, and he just looks at him, pokes him with a pencil out of his hand. But I remember sitting there thinking, I remember that thing, that could be a ghost, that could be a ghost. And he's like with the audience and prods this guy, just looks at him and carries on. I always liked it. I thought it was really dry. Fantastic. The ending is brilliant. It goes absolutely crackers. Everyone, we haven't even talked about Stay Puffed.
No, not yet.
It's just absolutely bonkers. Obviously, they're released to take on Zool, who's now taking up residence on top of Spook Central. And it's great. They have to climb. How many flights of stairs? Because they can't take the lift, can it? Because they've probably
22
killed them to
flights
do
it is. Yeah.
22
Yeah.
flights of stairs.
Yeah.
And get to the top of the face, this thing who you will choose the destroyer. And they're right, clear your minds, clear whatever you think of, that'll be it. Yeah, clear your minds. I didn't think it's chosen. I didn't think of anything. Did you? No, did you? Ray? Well, what kind of hand could it be? It's these gigantic fucking marshmallow man in a sailor's hat marching through the street. It was just, it's still fucking weird now. I think this is part of the problem with Ghostbusters too. I don't think it had anything to match that image. It's just
No.
fucking bizarre. Well, comes marching through the streets, crushing things, and then attack it with the proton packs. And it's like, remember its face? It screams like a child. It's weird, isn't it? Really strange, angry face it's got. It's fucking great. And of course, it's at that point they decide they have to cross the stream to destroy weird-looking Bridget Nielsen, who's. There's a great line delivered by Rick Moranis where he's as Louis Tully, and he's been taken over as well. And he's trying to tell them how Gozer came in many different forms, and he just gives this thing about there were a lot of things wish I'd never been born that day. I can tell you, it's so funny. I can't remember the line is, but it's great. They've got like a colander on his head measuring his brainwaves.
Vince, you said before you were waiting for a sign. What sign are you waiting for?
Gozer the Traveler. He will come in one of the pre-chosen forms. During the rectification of the Voldrani, the Traveler came as a large and moving torb. Then, during the third reconciliation of the last of the McKettrick supplicants, they chose a new form for him, that of a giant slore. Many Shubs and Zools knew what it was to be roasted in the depths of the slore that day, I can tell you.
But sorry, back to the ending, which I think is fantastic. And sometimes some people say it's a little bit abrupt how it ends, and I don't think it is. I think it's good value for money, Ghostbusters. Like I said, I think it took me a long time, multiple viewings, because I don't want to take things in straight away. I think I told you before, I'll make my own plot line up and just completely ensure anything that's supposed to be important. Like, I completely missed that the activity is because of Spook Central. That's why. It's not just because they're always there. And so it does work. It works really well. And it's great that they obviously blast Mr. Stay Puft with the cross the streams. Decide obviously not supposed to because it'll blow them all up, but it doesn't, and it destroys Stay Puft, and everyone's covered in marshmallows apart from Peter Venkman. It's fucking brilliant, and he just turns completely bored, and they're all looking at him, all covered in marshmallows, and it's brilliant. The transformation of Sigourney Weaver into the dogs, or the devil dogs, whatever they're called, and Rick Moranis into the other one is really well done. I can't speak high enough for the special effects. I think they're so good. It's a great one-off movie. I think it's almost like the antithesis of American Wealth in London, where I think Ghostbusters it was big on laughs, little on scares, and it was the other side. There was the American Wealth was big on scares, little on laughs, but the balance is finely tuned. It works really well in both cases, and it's interesting the connection with Harold Ramis. We've come off Animal House, and Harold Ramis rewrote Animal House and streamlined it, because again it was another big script. He sort of streamlined it, and he wanted to play Boone, but they said you look too old, so they offered him a lesser role. So, okay. No, I don't want to do it. He looks too old compared to who? And then he comes into this, and I thought, when you said it, Dan Aykroyd's page was 500, that script was 500 pages long, and Ramis streamlined it and got it down. He's obviously a clever guy. To do that, obviously, you could see the potential in Ghostbusters. It's strange because when you think about it, the urban myth is that it was originally Venkman was going to be John Belushi, and it's probably not that at all. It's probably a different film altogether, a different beast altogether.
Totally,
in Aykroyd's original script, but it's great how it worked. It's a modern classic for me. It really is. It's one of the best films of the 80s.
For sure.
It's part of the problem now. It's one of those films. It's so good that without the principal actors, they have problems. Even the sequel, they couldn't match the original. It was difficult. The lightning couldn't strike twice, and now they've tried to remake it with the ladies, and it was completely fucking awful. And now they've got the new one coming out with Paul Rudd, which would be interesting to see how it turns out. But I'm not particularly looking forward to it. I think it's a proper.
That's it is a sequel. It is like the Afterlife, which is directed by Jason Reitman, Ivan's son. it's classed as a follow-up to Ghostbusters 2. It is classed as a sequel, like the third in the series. So yeah, it'll be interesting because I remember going to see Ghostbusters 2 in '89 and just coming out really disappointed. Like I just didn't like Ghostbusters 2 at all because I just saw it as a bit of a sellout. Like in the first movie, like there's so much smoking and swearing, like for a PG film. Like the Ghostbusters like smirking tabs throughout most of the whole film, and there's a lot of swear words. But it seems like when Ghostbusters 2 came out in '89, they'd really toned it down to cater for the kids' audience who'd like loved the real Ghostbusters cartoon, because that became such a big success in the late '80s. And obviously, Onion Head had been renamed Slimer and was now like a friendly ghost who helped the Ghostbusters. And it isn't quite like that in the film, but he is called Slimer and he is in the film and he helps. I think he helps Lewis Tully's character at some point. And I just saw it as a real toned down version of the first movie, like more kiddie friendly, which I didn't like. But now I like Ghostbusters 2 a lot more now than when I first saw it. It's still inferior to the first film by a long way, but I still actually think there's a lot to love in Ghostbusters 2. A lot of the humor is good. It is still very, very funny. But yeah, the central premise of this river of slime that feeds off negative energy. It's the story isn't great, to be honest, in Ghostbusters 2, but I still think there's a lot to enjoy in Ghostbusters 2. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how the sequel ties in to the first two movies. I think it's set like one of the main characters is Spengler's grandson, I think, played by Finn Wolfhard, who's the kid from Stranger Things and the Stephen King It movies. So I'm going to go in with an open mind. I really like Paul Rudd. I love Paul Rudd, actually. I think he's great. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and there's already been a clip, like we talked about Stay Puft at the end of Ghostbusters. There's a clip from Afterlife which has been released where Paul Rudd's character is attacked by lots of mini Stay Puffs in a supermarket. So obviously they're sticking with the Stay Puft thing. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Sort of the end of Ghostbusters with Stay Puft. It's so weird and out there. You just wouldn't expect it at all. And I love it. It just works so well. Like, Venkman says to Spengler, Ray has gone bye-bye, Egon. Like, because Ray just completely loses his shit when he sees this symbol of his childhood wanting to destroy him. It's just it's so well. And there's so many things we haven't talked about. And, I know we could probably talk about this film for another hour or two, but don't worry, we're not going to, kids. But it just works so well. And the whole, the climax just works well. The whole crossing the streams thing, it's been established earlier on in the film that, don't cross the streams, it would be bad. Sort of saying, imagine life just instantaneous. Imagine every atom in your body just instantly vaporizing and time ending. And Venkman's like, okay, good safety tip. Thanks, Egon. But that's the only way that they can win at the end is to cross the streams. And they're going to live. There's no danger really. But yeah, I love the climax, and I love the bit where Ray is appointed to talk to Gozer, and he's just saying, as a designated representative of the city of New York, I command you to go back to back to where you came from, or the nearest parallel dimension. And Venkman's like, yeah, that'll do it, thanks, Ray. And and then Gozer says, "Are you a god?" And Ray's like, "No." And she's like, "Then die!" and sort of zaps them with sort of energy. And I love the line where Zedmore says to Ray, "Ray, next time if someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes." It's just full of great. It's just full of great lines, great humor.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, and you talked about how clever Ramis was, and he took Aykroyd's crazy script and helped him distill it down into what's on the screen now. And I think you're right, where a lot of people think that Belushi's character was Venkman in the original script. And I don't think it was, because when Ramis was rewriting the script, they knew that Murray had been cast as Venkman, and he basically completely rewrote that part for Bill Murray, because Ramis knew Murray well because they'd done Meatballs and Stripes together, and Ramis knew how Murray would deliver his dialogue, so that whole part was rewritten for Bill Murray, like specifically for him. So that thing about it was just Belushi's role given to Murray isn't true at all. So it's just interesting. There's so many interesting behind the scenes stories about how the film came to be. It's just endured so much. And I remember as you said, in '84, I remember seeing the Ghostbusters logo on bus shelters everywhere. It was just on bus stops everywhere, and it would say, coming to save the world this Christmas. I think it would say on the posters. Obviously, in the US, it would be coming to save the world this summer. Just seeing the logo everywhere, not really knowing what it was, and the song was everywhere. I just remember it so well. I have so many fond memories of that time, and I remember seeing it at Christmas '84 in this flea pit cinema in Newcastle under Lyme called the Savoy. Seeing it with my parents and just being absolutely blown away by it. And then I remember it being the Christmas premiere on ITV. I think it was Boxing Day a few years later. I remember when it came on the telly. It's just there's just so much to love about this film. It's it is brilliant, and it's a great comparison that you make with an American Werewolf, where it's the balance of humor and scares, and it's sort of the complete antithesis of American Werewolf in terms of the scares versus laughs. But yeah, it's a great movie. Absolutely love it. And I'm going to stop rambling. I'll just hand over to you, Ben. Have you got any more final thoughts? Any more final thoughts on the film?
No, I think we've done it justice enough. It's fantastic, and it's got that great rare quality where it seems almost timeless, even though obviously it's very 80s. But it seems almost timeless because the craft works so well in it. The special effects, the acting, the writing. It's all up there. It's really good, and it's again another worthy addition, I think, to the Divine Comedy.
Yeah, it really is. It is. It's a superb movie. It really is. And obviously, we'll talk about Afterlife when it comes out on disc, whenever that's going to be, whenever it comes out in cinemas, and whenever it comes out on disc. So we will obviously cover that when the time comes. And maybe we should talk about Ghostbusters 2 at some point as well, because as I said, I think there's a lot to love there, even though it is, it is an inferior sequel, but I still think it's worth a revisit.